Today's video, I have the new iPhone 16 Pro Max, and I wanted to test how its camera performed against my $5,000 cinema camera and see if the exciting new video features could truly keep up with my professional workflow. So that opening sequence was shot with both my FX3 and the iPhone 16 Pro in Apple's new ProRes Log video profile. I'm curious if you guys can tell which camera got what shot, but already I'm pretty impressed with this camera just because I've never had this much flexibility editing phone footage. However, there are some pretty big differences that need to be pointed out, and I figured I'd run this camera through a few tests to show off its strengths and its weaknesses, so let's get to it.
For our first test, we're just gonna go through the different lenses on the camera and some of the improved camera settings and just compare the image quality. I figured we'd come to Magic Kingdom, interesting little subject, and this will just show you the different levels of image quality you can get out of this compact little camera.
So one of the first big differences that really stands out to me is a difference in depth between the two cameras. This is really going to be physically impossible for the iPhone just because of the sensor size and the fixed camera lenses. But one of Apple's workarounds is cinematic mode, where it uses the software to artificially create background blur and try to replicate different fast aperture lenses. I honestly think cinematic mode is very gimmicky, and personally, I would never use it in my workflow. The shallow depth of field that it creates is very distracting and off-putting. The software doesn't know where to start the blurring. Two things can be the same distance from the camera, but one is sharp and the other is blurred. It also becomes very obvious on people and their hair. You also can't shoot cinematic mode in log, which is arguably the best feature of this new camera, which the log footage, if it weren't for the depth of field, matched up in terms of color and detail quite nicely to my FX3. All in all, I have to say that the standard camera in this in good lighting matches up well enough that I would integrate some of the shots on this phone with some of my professional edits. But with my style of content, we don't always have great lighting conditions. So we definitely need to still put this camera through a few more tests.
Okay, so we're gonna test the low light compared to my cinema camera at this Halloween event. So let's kick it off.
Okay, so for the low light test, I totally expected it to be no contest in terms of image quality difference, but the iPhone maintained pretty good image quality in this low light scenario. Usually smaller sensor cameras create incredibly noisy images in these kinds of scenarios, but with Apple's log profile, they work some kind of magic, and I was able to reduce a lot of the noise in these images and got really usable results. Now, when you compare the footage side by side to my FX3, the difference in quality becomes a little more obvious. The first is that depth of field again. You just can't create the same subject separation. And then the FX3 has a more pleasing bokeh. The iPhone struggles, especially with the smaller sensor, with that bokeh and making it more pleasing. The highlight roll-off is not as smooth. It's especially noticeable and harsh with this contrasty setting. The iPhone also still suffers from the weird halo artifacts from pinpoint light sources, which can often be distracting. I think that despite these differences, the iPhone produced usable footage, with some of them being able to be snuck into professional workflows, and I think they'd go unnoticed. It would mostly be quick clips, but usable, honestly. I definitely use them sparingly. So realistically, the iPhone isn't even going to come close to replacing a cinema camera like my FX3. And truthfully, going into making this video, I knew that. It becomes really obvious with 90% of the clips when you place them side by side too. The phone is just never going to recreate that same depth with its fixed lenses and its small sensor. Funny enough, Apple knew this very early on when they were doing their Shot on iPhone campaign, and I have this picture from an Apple set where they attached a $50,000 cinema lens to the iPhone sensor and had the raw sensor data feed into a separate computer so they can just get the most image quality they could. And they did their Shot on iPhone campaign with that, which you'd never be able to get that quality out of your iPhone. Even Apple knows that the only way for them to even come close to trying to replicate the images from these cinema cameras is with software, gimmicky things like cinematic mode. I think it's gonna get better, but I just don't think it's going to match depth that you get from a true sensor that's capturing it all physically versus trying to do it with software. Now, where I think the iPhone will shine going into my workflow is for some establishing shots where maybe I want to get my phone out really quick, or I want to take advantage of the lack of shallow depth of field and I want to show everything in an establishing shot or in a space. That is where the iPhone really excels. Sometimes you don't want shallow depth of field. Sometimes you want everything in focus. And the fact that I will be able to get matching colors if I shoot ProRes Log is amazing. But I do want to make a note about ProRes Log. It is definitely not realistic to shoot ProRes Log. This 256 gigabyte iPhone will only do 40 minutes of ProRes Log. So Apple needs to find a way to get the compression right and make the log usable. Now, another area where the iPhone's gonna shine is the best camera is the one you have on you. So I always have my phone on me. I can just pull it out. Sometimes I don't have my cinema camera. Sometimes I'm not allowed to bring my big cinema camera and I want to capture something. Having this high quality image in my pocket on my phone is amazing, and that is where it's really going to come in clutch. But when it comes to getting the cinematic image quality that you want from a professional camera, the phone isn't going to do it. So had fun shooting this video anyways. It was a fun little video to make this week, but if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more content, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.